It's another edition of our candidates profiles, and today I'm pleased to be joined by UCP candidate for Bonnyville, Cold Lake, and St. Paul, Mr. David Hanson. Why should people vote for you, Dave?
Well, I think my experience in the House in opposition for the last 4 years, and I've got 37 years in the oil and gas industry, so I'm well acquainted with what people are going through up here and what they're trying to live through in this last 4 years with the NDP government. So.
In this area, a lot of people are hurting, unemployment skyrocketing, a lot of people not having jobs, a lot of companies shutting down. How do you plan to get people back to work?
Well, just to clarify on that, we saw an interesting stat. Just in the town of Bonnyville alone, the oil company investment has dropped from over $700 million in 2017 to just over $300 million in 2018. And the stats show that there's 80 less companies to deal with just in the Bonnyville area. So that's very, very concerning. Another thing that I'm seeing is normally when you're out campaigning and you're putting up campaign signs, you're competing with other, trying to find spots to compete with other campaigns. But we're trying to find spots where there aren't for sale signs. It's very, very concerning.
Do you think a lot of that has to do with the carbon tax? Because I know a lot of people that I've heard from don't like paying it. It's an extra 7 cents. We were talking to GasBuddy.com petroleum analyst Dan McTagg, an extra 7 cents on fuel. What are your thoughts on the carbon tax?
Well, our feeling is that's going to be bill number one as soon as we get elected, is to cancel the carbon tax. So by June 1st, there will be no more carbon tax in Alberta. And, it affects everybody. We tried to get exemptions for school boards, for charitable organizations, and the NDP voted them down. And that's all written on, it's on paper, it's in Hanson. We got them to do standing votes. They all stood up and voted against exempting a food bank from a carbon tax. Like, how can you be proud of that stat?
Speaking of school boards and teachers, your candidate opponent, NDP candidate Carrie Wan, has said countless times you're going to cut teachers. Is that true?
That's absolutely false. Absolutely false. We're not making any cuts to education at all. The biggest threat to school teachers and education up in this area is the carbon tax, for one. And I can give you an example. One of the school boards paid over $210,000 last year just to heat buildings. Another $70,000 went to the busing in the form of carbon tax for their fuel. That's the equivalent of 3 teaching jobs or minimum 10 support staff in the schools. That's what's going to hurt education in our area.
Dave, what are you hearing at the doors going out door knocking?
Well, very positive. We knocked on a bunch of doors up here in Cold Lake today, and we painted one block blue. It was a sign at just about every house, anybody that was home at that anyway, and we left some brochures for those that weren't. A couple of things that we did here was some concern that about vote splitting from some of these fringe parties that are showing up, and some anger toward that.
What are people most concerned about, the key issue that you're hearing at the doors?
Jobs, the economy, carbon tax. It's pretty simple, and pipelines, right? Of course, I think pipelines is the strong point, because that's going to fix a lot of the economy issues, job issues as well.
How do you plan to get a pipeline in when the federal government is kind of saying, I don't know if we want one?
Well, you know what? I'm not convinced that our current government is actually fighting for pipelines. I've compared Minister Phillips and Premier Notley to Stampede Wrestling when it comes to fighting for pipelines. I think it's a joke, really. 4 years ago they were out campaigning against pipelines, and now they're all of a sudden for pipelines because it's in their best interest.
Dave, really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you very much.
That's UCP candidate Dave Hanson. We got an election coming up April 16th. For Primetime Local News, I'm Justin Marshall.